He and his ambassador, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., arranged with the Democrats, with the Biden-Harris administration, and apparently flew on a military plane, a U.S. military plane, to Pennsylvania, which is a very important swing state, as we all know, and did what was in effect a campaign stop.
And we begin today, as we always do, with This Week on the Hill from Salem News Channel. Speaker Johnson appeared and had some strong words about President Zelensky of Ukraine injecting himself, willingly or not, into our presidential campaigns. Take a look.
The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, making what you described as a campaign stop in Pennsylvania to help Democrats. You responded pretty strongly to that.
It was a pretty outrageous breach of protocol and what I feel is appropriate, and what Zelensky himself has said is appropriate over the last year or so. He said that they should not be intervening or interfering in any way in American elections. And yet that's what happened this week. He and his ambassador, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., arranged with the Democrats, with the Biden-Harris administration, and apparently flew on a military plane, a U.S. military plane, to Pennsylvania, which is a very important swing state, as we all know, and did what was in effect a campaign stop. He was accompanied by the governor of Pennsylvania, who was almost the vice presidential nominee with Kamala Harris, with the Senate candidate there, Mr. Casey, and with House candidates. No Republicans present because none were invited. That is not what the president of Ukraine in its desperate time of national defense needs to be doing, and we let them know about that.
So what response have you gotten?
Well, I sent a letter yesterday morning demanding that the ambassador who apparently arranged all of this, we'll give Zelensky the benefit of the doubt. Surely he did not arrange it. We certainly hope that's not true. But we asked for that ambassador to be terminated. This is an unforgivable offense at a very sensitive time. And, Tony, it comes on the heels of President Zelensky making some untoward remarks regarding President Trump and his ability to stop the war, and even our vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance.
Now, it should be noted that President Zelensky did meet this morning with President Trump at Trump Tower and spoke before the cameras. But Akash, the speaker's got a point here. This is unprecedented for a foreign leader, especially a foreign leader engaged in a military conflict with an adversary and receiving billions of U.S. aid for that war effort, for him to appear to take sides at the height of a presidential campaign.
Yeah, again, I don't know what the protocol is here, but it's obviously very, very untoward. Look, reasonable people can disagree about what the U.S. involvement in Ukraine should be. Congress has had those debates. Speaker Johnson has his opinion. But it was very obviously a politically tinged event, situation. It was in a swing state. It was all Democrats, no Republicans invited. And even though it was sort of under the administration's official capacity, we know exactly what was going on. And obviously Zelensky has the history of again, politically tinged comments he's made regarding U.S. politics. And again, whether he can be blamed or not, I don't think is the issue here. He's a foreign actor. It's the administration that facilitated this that should obviously know better and should be held accountable. I think Speaker Johnson is taking a sober approach to this, but he's making exactly the point that needs to be made, which is that the administration acted wildly inappropriately in this situation.
Chris, you're the morning voice in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Clearly, this was a move to attract Pennsylvania voters. Does it work, or does it actually kind of have a boomerang effect?
Yeah, no, it ticked a lot of people off, I'll tell you that. And to see the governor of Pennsylvania, who, you know, you have a Philadelphia and a Pittsburgh that are awash in crime. In fact, it was just discovered here in the last week that Pittsburgh in particular had not been turning over their crime statistics to the FBI. And the crime is far worse in Pittsburgh than they thought it to be. From prices in terms of inflation that are highest in Pennsylvania than anywhere else in the country, incidentally. That study came out too. Things aren't good in the Commonwealth. And to see him signing munitions and shells like he's, Patton or something, was a little off-putting, to say the least. And I thought it kind of funny today to see Zelensky with Trump. He looked like a whipped pup. I was kind of surprised, frankly, Trump even agreed to have the meeting. I talked with Keith Kellogg, the former national security advisor to Trump's team, and he said that he was pretty confident Trump would not meet with him based on what he said about J.D. Vance. That ultimately ended up happening, but Zelensky looked rather contrite this morning if you took visual cues.
Well, and by the way, I think Trump going ahead and with that meeting, despite what was said by President Zelensky, actually shows him to be a bit of a statesman, right? And say, listen, you can say what you want politically, but if I'm commander in chief, if I'm the president, I'm going to have to deal with this and work with it, and I'll work with you. I don't care how you feel about me personally. I think that actually was kind of a grown-up move. Matt Foldy, what do you make of this, and what's the whispers on Capitol Hill here about what, again, is unprecedented? This was a partisan event, and, they need Republican votes to continue to fund that Ukraine war machine. Republicans can't be very happy about it.
The government now is on recess, in the House and the Senate between now and the election. And I was on Capitol Hill this past week in those closing days, and there was a lot of Ukrainian people walking around. There was a big kind of, not big, but rally. It wasn't, as big as the jihadist encampment outside the White House we saw over the summer. So what's interesting here is a couple of things. I think that Josh Shapiro is immensely more politically talented than Tim Walz, and we know why Kamala Harris did not pick him to be her vice president. Would, of course, be ironic if she loses the election by losing Pennsylvania because she was trying to appeal to the jihad squad. And it is a little bit weird for Zelensky to especially attack J.D. Vance and Trump. You may know we got an election in just about 40 days to go, and we don't know who's going to be the next president. So it's not wise if you're a country seeking U.S. assistance to be attacking the people who may be running the country for the next 4 years. And I think it's interesting to contrast this with Bibi Netanyahu, who was speaking at the United Nations earlier today. Delegates or whatever, ambassadors from a bunch of countries walked out. I think they were concerned their pagers were about to detonate during his speech. But what you don't have Netanyahu doing, obviously America has also been supplying Israel a lot in the wake of the October 7th terrorist attacks, but you don't have Netanyahu doing an anti-Biden rally while he's in the United States of America. And I think that is just from the Ukrainian and the Israeli standpoints. I think Ukraine would probably be happier on some level if Kamala Harris wins, and I think Israel would certainly be happier if Donald Trump wins. So that's just been two interesting contrasts in how foreign leaders have been approaching the waning days of the election. And remember that Mike Johnson, he almost a little bit lost his speakership over giving aid to Ukraine. So I think this is a big shot across the bow for him to say to Zelensky, hey, you need to look at firing the ambassador who might have set this event up. This is not some guy who is wishy-washy on giving further U.S. assistance to Ukraine. So for him to be saying this, I think is actually a very big deal.
Real quickly, let me go back around the horn, and I'll start with you, Matt. Do you think the aid to Ukraine, the war in Eastern Europe, or any of the foreign conflicts right now are actually making a difference in the way people are voting, or is it really very much about the economy and the border in your mind?
Well, ultimately, you're stealing what I want to talk about later here with this. I think that foreign policy isn't going to win you an election, but it certainly can lose you an election. And Kamala Harris, remember, went to Europe in February 2022 to reassure our allies that everything is going to be okay. Days later, Putin invades Ukraine. And of course, we've said a million times, he didn't do any of this when Trump was president. But I do think ultimately at the end of the day, people are going to be more concerned about pocketbook issues than foreign policy. Whether that's good or bad, is irrelevant. Our failures in Afghanistan are very bad. I don't think that's what the election is going to hinge on, though.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. But Chris, these Pennsylvania voters better than I do. But I'm back to the boomerang effect. I actually think that Shapiro and the Democrats sort of loading up on this photo op. I think it was kind of a stumble. I think it actually does more harm than good. I don't know what voters are swayed by this in Pennsylvania because it happened.
I have a wacky conspiracy theory. You ready for it?
Okay.
It goes like this. Josh Shapiro has been humming Hail to the Chief to himself since he was a toddler. And I just have this funny feeling that he turned her down. She may well have asked him and he turned her down. I think he thinks she's a loser. And I think deep down, Josh Shapiro's ambition to be president, her getting in his way, is something he'd like to deal with. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but Josh Shapiro cannot wait. He believes himself to be the next star.
So going along with this thing, he actually did it in a way to submarine the Harris-Walz.
I know that may sound a little nutty, but I actually think he benefits from another term of Trump that he can run against. He cannot have Kamala Harris win, perhaps give him another 8 to 12 years to sit it out before he gets his bite.
Well, we love nutty here. Akash, you don't need to dabble in the conspiracy theories necessarily, but one thing that we haven't mentioned much is the use of a military jet on this. That has to get approved by the White House, by the Pentagon. They knew what they were doing. Akash, should there be new rules about this sort of thing going forward? Because it does leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
I don't think there's enough specificity here to write a rule. This is just so unbecoming. An administration should know better. Zelensky's actively at war, and we're 40 days away from an election. What are you doing using a military jet to fly him to a swing state to essentially hold a political event? I mean, again, I think the vast majority of our elected officials probably know better than to do that from both parties, frankly. And I think it just shows, frankly, a lot of desperation on the part of the administration and the Harris campaign to feel the need to do something like this, knowing how unbecoming it is. Now, again, they've done a number of things like this that are just way beyond the pale in order to advance their political agenda. So maybe we shouldn't be that surprised, but I do think it is telling that they felt like they needed to do something like this.
Yeah, that's actually a very wise and circumspect take there. They should know better. And I appreciate that, especially coming off the heels of Stegall's wild-eyed conspiracy theories. Well, let's clean it up here, gentlemen. Clean it up.